Hey everyone, welcome to the channel where I share creepy and scary stories that will give you chills. If you love horror and spooky tales, make sure to subscribe and join me every week for a new story. Let's get into the dark side together. Alex's boots crunched on the frozen trail as he ascended deeper into the mountains. The cold bit through his jacket, but the promise of untouched wilderness and perfect shots kept him moving forward. He'd left behind the noise of the city, the endless scrolling feeds, and the suffocating routine. Here, at the edge of the world, everything was silent. The village of Durness was little more than a cluster of wooden cabins tucked into the snow-dusted forest. Its few inhabitants eyed Alex warily when he arrived, their faces weathered and unreadable. At the small inn, he was given a key with a grave warning: stay indoors after sunset. The mountain keeps its own company at night. Alex laughed it off as superstition, but as dusk fell and the wind howled like something alive outside his window, he began to wonder what the villagers truly feared. That night, strange sounds echoed through the forest, whispers carried on the wind, footsteps that weren't his own. Something was watching. The morning sun filtered weakly through the heavy branches, casting jagged patterns on the snow-covered ground. Alex packed his camera gear with practiced care, eager to capture the pristine wilderness before the weather turned. At breakfast, the villagers sat in silence, save for the occasional clink of utensils and low murmurs. An elderly man named Elias, the innkeeper, approached Alex's table cautiously. "Be careful," Elias said, his voice rough like gravel. "The mountain doesn't take kindly to strangers." Alex forced a smile. "I'm just here for the photos. Nothing more. But sometimes the mountain takes what it wants." Elias's eyes darkened. People disappear, some never be found. Alex nodded, dismissing it as local folklore, until later that afternoon, when he ventured deeper into the forest and stumbled upon an abandoned campsite. The fire pit was cold, but footprints circled the clearing, fresh and unsettlingly large. A chill ran down his spine. He raised his camera, but as he peered through the lens, the forest seemed to shift, the trees bending slightly, shadows moving against the light. A low growl rumbled from the underbrush. Alex spun around, heart pounding, but saw nothing, only the whispering wind. That night, the howling returned, louder and closer, as if the darkness itself had teeth. Alex lay awake in a small cabin, the thin walls barely muffling the eerie sounds outside. The howls echoed through the trees like mournful cries, rising and falling with the wind. He tried to convince himself it was just wolves, or some wild animal disturbed by his presence. But there was something different this time. A faint tapping came at his window, soft but deliberate. He sat up, heart racing, and peered into the darkness. At first, nothing, just the swaying silhouettes of pine branches. Then, as his eyes adjusted, he saw a figure standing just beyond the tree line. Tall, impossibly thin, its form shifting in and out of focus like a mirage. Its eyes glowed faintly, a pale, sickly green. Alex's breath caught in his throat. The figure didn't move closer but lingered, watching. He reached for his camera, fingers trembling, but the batteries were dead. Panic rising, Alex pulled the curtains closed and bolted the door. Sleep escaped him as whispers filled the room, soft voices murmuring unintelligible words, promising things he couldn't understand. By dawn, the figure was gone, but the dread remained, thick in the cold morning air. The morning light was pale and weak as Alex forced himself out of bed. The previous night's terror clung to him like a shadow, but curiosity overpowered fear. He needed answers. After a sparse breakfast, Alex approached Elias, hoping the old man might shed light on the strange figure and the haunting sounds. Elias sighed, his weathered face folding deeper into worry lines. "You've seen it, haven't you?" Alex nodded, lowering his voice. "Last night, something was outside my window, watching." Elias glanced around before beckoning Alex closer. "There are stories, old ones, passed down but never spoken aloud. They say the mountain is cursed, home to spirits who guard it fiercely. They don't take kindly to outsiders." "What kind of spirits?" Alex asked, heart pounding. "Shadows that walk like men but aren't. They drift between this world and the next, hungry for the warmth of the living." Alex swallowed hard, trying to process. Is there a way to protect myself? Elias shook his head. The only protection is respect, and knowing the mountain's secret. The secret? Elias's eyes darkened. Many years ago, the village was built on sacred ground, an ancient burial site. The settlers disturbed what should have been left alone. Since then, the spirits have awakened. The disappearances, the whispers in the night. It's the price we pay. Alex felt a cold wind sweep through the room, carrying the faint scent of pine and something else. Something metallic and old. Determined to uncover the truth, Alex decided to explore the mountain's base, searching for clues beyond the village's warnings. That afternoon, the forest grew denser and colder as Alex pushed forward, the snow crunching underfoot. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches tangled like skeletal fingers. After hours of trekking, he found what looked like a shallow pit partially covered by snow and ice. Strange markings surrounded it, symbols carved into the stone rim, faded but unmistakably deliberate. As he examined them, a sudden rustle came from the bushes nearby. Alex spun around, but only the wind answered. His breath came fast. Something was watching him. He took a deep breath and snapped a photo of the carvings, hoping the images might reveal something later. But the deeper he went into the mountain's shadow, the heavier the air felt, like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. As the sun dipped behind the jagged peaks, casting long shadows across the snow-laden forest, Alex stumbled upon a narrow clearing. Nestled between ancient pines was a stone structure half buried in ice, a forgotten altar, its surface etched with faded runes and symbols eerily similar to those he found earlier at the pit's edge. The air here was unnaturally still, as if time itself hesitated in reverence or fear. Alex's fingers traced the icy carvings, his breath clouding in the cold as a chill slithered up his spine. Something about this place whispered of old power, forgotten rites, and a warning unspoken. Suddenly, the forest around him seemed to grow darker, shadows pooling beneath the trees, lengthening unnaturally. From the corner of his eye, he caught movement, a figure slipping silently between the trunks. Heart pounding. He raised his camera, but the apparition vanished before the lens could focus. A whisper brushed against his ear, fragile and hollow. "Leave before the mountain claims you." Alex swallowed hard, but a compulsion to understand, to capture the truth, pushed him onward. He knelt beside the altar, noticing fresh scratches on the stone, as if something or someone had recently disturbed this sacred place. Then the earth trembled beneath his knees. The mountain was waking. The tremor beneath Alex's knees subsided, leaving an eerie silence that pressed on his ears like a physical weight. The forest seemed to hold its breath. He rose slowly from the altar, glancing around with sharp eyes, but the shadows had not yielded any answers, only an unsettling emptiness. Turning back toward the village, the sky suddenly darkened as thick clouds rolled in with unnatural speed. A biting wind swept through the pines, carrying icy needles of snow that stung his face. The storm was coming, fierce and sudden, much too soon for the season. Alex tightened his jacket and started back down the trail, but the growing gale soon swallowed his footprints and tore at the trees with ferocity that seemed almost alive. As the howling wind whipped through the forest, Alex spotted a faint light flickering between the trees ahead, a small lantern, swinging in the darkness. Cautiously, he approached and found an old man standing by a fallen log, his back to the storm, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The stranger's clothes were worn and patched, soaked through by the cold rain. "Lost, are you?" the man said in a gravelly voice without turning. Alex nodded, surprised by the stranger's calmness amid the chaos. "I'm trying to get back to the village before the storm hits." The old man chuckled, a sound like dry leaves rustling. "The mountain has its own plans. You won't find shelter where you think you will." Alex shivered, feeling the man's gaze piercing through the storm. "Do you know about the altar? The spirits?" The man turned slowly, revealing eyes as cold and dark as the forest at midnight. "I've lived here longer than the trees have stood. I know the mountain's secrets and its curses." He beckoned Alex closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Come, I'll show you what the villagers hide." Trust war with instinct, but Alex's need for answers overrode caution. Together, they moved into the gathering storm, deeper into the forest embrace. The old man's cabin was hidden in a thicket of twisted trees, smoke curling from the chimney despite the relentless wind. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of herbs and old paper. The walls were lined with faded maps, ancient texts, and strange talismans carved from bone and wood. The man introduced himself as Garrett, a recluse and guardian of forgotten knowledge. He explained that the mountain's curse was not merely spiritual, but tied to a force older than human memory, a dark entity bound beneath the soil, disturbed long ago by settlers desperate for survival. "The altar you found," Garrett said, "is a seal, a barrier holding the darkness at bay. But every disturbance weakens it. The recent tremors, they mean the curse is stirring again." Alex listened, captivated and terrified. Garrett warned him of restless spirits, creatures that fed on fear and flesh alike, and the necessity of ritual to strengthen the seal before the next full moon, or risk losing the village forever. As the storm raged outside, the two men prepared for what was to come, a desperate battle against the mountain's ancient wrath, with the fate of all who lived beneath its shadow hanging in the balance. The storm outside battered the cabin, lightning cracking to the sky and thunder shaking the ancient walls. Inside, Garrett moved with deliberate purpose, gathering herbs, carved stones, and weathered parchment scattered across a wooden table. Alex watched, a mixture of awe and apprehension knotting in his stomach. The weight of what he had stumbled into pressed heavily on him, but the urgency in Garrett's eyes left no room for doubt or delay. "This ritual," Garrett explained, "is the only way to reinforce the seal beneath the altar. Without it, the darkness will seep into our world, consuming everything." He handed Alex a small vial filled with a glowing amber liquid. "Drink this. It will open your senses, allowing you to perceive the spirits, and stand against their influence." Alex hesitated, then nodded, swallowing the bitter liquid. Almost instantly, a wave of dizziness washed over him, and the room seemed to pulse with unseen energy. Garrett lit a circle of candles around the cabin, their flames flickering wildly despite the still air inside. He began chanting in an ancient tongue, his voice weaving through the room like a thread of fire. Shadows gathered along the edges of the cabin, coalescing into shapes both horrifying and sorrowful. Faces twisted in torment, limbs reaching out as if begging for release. Alex felt a cold hand brush his shoulder, and for a moment, the world around him shattered. Visions flooded his mind. The settlers' greed, the desecration of sacred ground, the anger of spirits betrayed. With a guttural cry, Garrett smashed a carved talisman onto the floor. A blinding light erupted, forcing the shadows to recoil. Breathless, Alex realized this was only the beginning. Night descended over the mountain village like a suffocating shroud. The wind had died to an uneasy stillness, and the stars were swallowed by thick clouds, plunging the world into an oppressive darkness. Alex stepped outside Garrett's cabin, the amber liquid still warm in his veins, senses heightened in strange, unsettling ways. Every shadow seemed to twitch with life, every whisper of wind carrying distant, anguished voices. The villagers had shuttered their homes, doors bolted and windows barred. The streets were deserted, save for the occasional flicker of candlelight through cracked panes. Alex made his way toward the altar clearing, heart pounding as the air grew colder, heavier with every step. The snow beneath his boots was unnaturally still. No crunch, no disturbance, like the earth itself was holding its breath. As he approached, a pale mist curled around the altar's base, shifting and swirling as if alive. The runes glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with his own heartbeat. Suddenly, from the mist emerged figures, ghostly, hollow-eyed apparitions, their forms flickering like dying flames. Their mouths opened in silent screams, faces twisted with sorrow and rage. Alex's vision blurred, the world tipping as the spirits reached toward him, desperate for release or revenge. He gripped the talisman Garrett had given him tightly, chanting the ancient words Garrett had taught him. The spirits recoiled, their anguished wails piercing the night air. But then, from the darkness beyond the clearing, a deep, guttural growl rumbled, something far darker and more ancient than restless spirits. A monstrous shadow slithered forth, its eyes burning with malevolence, tendrils of darkness trailing behind it. Alex's breath froze. This was the curse itself, The ancient evil bound beneath the mountain, awakened by years of disturbance and growing stronger with every passing night. With no time to hesitate, Alex readied himself. The final battle for Greyhaven had begun. The monstrous shadow emerged fully from the swirling mist, towering over the altar like a living nightmare. Its form was grotesque and ever-shifting. A mass of writhing tendrils, sharp claws, and glowing, unblinking eyes that burned with otherworldly fire. Its breath came in ragged, cold gusts, carrying with it the scent of rot and ancient sorrow. Alex's heart pounded violently in his chest, but he forced himself to stand firm, clutching the talisman tightly. He repeated the incantation Garrett had taught him, his voice trembling but growing stronger with each word. The creature recoiled at the sound, emitting a guttural roar that shook the surrounding trees and caused snow to cascade from the branches. Around the altar, the runes flared to life, glowing bright blue and casting eerie shadows across the forest floor. Suddenly, the ghostly spirits that haunted the clearing rose from the mist, their pale forms swirling around Alex like a protective shield. Their anguished faces softened, eyes filled with hope and gratitude. Together, their ethereal voices joined in the chant, weaving an ancient power that pushed against the dark entity. The creature writhed and thrashed, tendrils lashing out wildly, but the combined force of Alex's will and the spirit's energy held it at bay. The battle raged for what felt like hours, the very earth trembling beneath their feet. Just as the creature lunged for Alex, he raised the talisman high, releasing a brilliant flash of light that pierced through the darkness. The shadow screamed, a sound that echoed to the mountains like a dying storm, and shattered into countless fragments of black smoke. The clearing fell silent, bathed in the soft glow of dawn breaking through the clouds. The spirits slowly faded, their faces serene as they whispered thanks and vanished. Finally freed from their torment, Alex collapsed to his knees, exhausted but victorious. The mountain's curse was broken, at least for now. The village of Durness awoke to a clear, crisp morning. The weight of fear lifted from the air. The snow sparkled under the gentle sun, and birds sang tentatively from the branches. Alex returned to the village, where the wary villagers now greeted him with nods of respect and cautious smiles. Garrett stood beside the altar, looking older yet peaceful. "You did what no one else could," Garrett said quietly. "The mountain will sleep again." But as Alex gazed toward the forest's edge, a lingering chill reminded him that some darkness never truly dies. In his pocket, the talisman pulsed faintly, a reminder that vigilance was eternal. Days passed in the village of Durness, with fragile peace settling like fresh snow. Alex, despite the relief, felt a restless unease gnawing at him. The mountain was quiet, but the talisman's faint pulse was a reminder that the darkness was never truly gone. It was only sleeping. One evening, while reviewing his photograph by the firelight, Alex noticed something strange. In the pictures taken near the altar, faint shapes flickered at the edges of the frame. Forms that hadn't been visible to the naked eye, faces twisted in silent screams, eyes that seemed to follow him. His camera, a tool for capturing truth, was now showing secrets the mountain wanted hidden. Determined to uncover more, Alex ventured back toward the forest, this time following a narrow, nearly hidden path he'd spotted earlier. The trail wound steeply downward into a shadowed ravine, where the trees grew twisted and the air hung heavy with the scent of earth and something metallic. At the bottom, he found a cavern entrance, half concealed by ice and snow. The talisman in his pocket thrummed louder as he approached. Inside, ancient walls bore carvings, stories etched in stone, depicting the original settlers' pact with the shadow entity, a promise to protect the land in exchange for silence and sacrifice. As he pressed deeper, a sudden chill enveloped him, and a voice whispered, faint but clear, "The cycle begins anew." Alex knew his battle was far from over. The cavern's air was thick and cold. Each breath Alex took creating small clouds that lingered in the dim light of his flashlight. The walls around him were alive with the ancient carvings, twisted figures locked in eternal struggle, symbols glowing faintly with an otherworldly energy. As he moved deeper into the cavern, the faint whisper echoed again, growing louder and more urgent. "The cycle begins anew." Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath his feet, dust cascading from the ceiling. From the shadows ahead, a low growl rose, deep and resonant, vibrating through the very stones. Alex froze as a massive shape emerged, an enormous creature, shadow and sinew, its eyes burning like molten gold. This was no mere spirit. This was the entity itself, bound beneath the mountain, now stirring after years of slumber. The talisman pulsed wildly in his pocket, as if warning him, pleading for action. Heart hammering, Alex grasped it tightly and recited the ancient words Garrett had taught him. A brilliant light burst from the talisman, momentarily blinding the cavern and forcing the creature back. But this was only a reprieve. The entity's hunger was awakening, and the cycle of darkness was ready to begin again. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the promise of storm, not just of nature, but of something far older and darker. Alex knew he had little time. The fate of the village, and perhaps the world, depended on stopping the curse once and for all. Alex stood at the mouth of the cavern, the talisman glowing fiercely in his hand. The ancient creature stirred behind him, its monstrous form shifting and writhing in the darkness. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, and the weight of centuries pressed down like a crushing force. Garrett appeared silently beside him, his face grave but resolute. "This is it," Garrett said. "The final moment. The mountain will fight with everything it has." Alex nodded, swallowing his fear. "I'm ready." Together, they stepped into the cavern's depths. The walls pulsed with sinister light, the carvings now alive with a malevolent energy. The creature's eyes blazed brighter, and it let out a deafening roar that shook the very bones of the mountain. Alex raised the talisman, chanting the ancient incantation with all his strength. The glowing runes on the walls responded, casting beams of light that formed a barrier between them and the darkness. The creature lunged, tendrils lashing out like thunderclaps. Alex dodged, focusing on the chant, feeling the power surge through him. Garrett joined in, his voice steady and commanding. With final cry, Alex unleashed the talisman's energy. A blinding explosion filled the cavern, light battling shadow in a furious clash. The creature screamed, its form unraveling like smoke in the wind. As the light faded, silence fell. The mountain's curse was broken. The sun rose over the nest, casting golden light on a village reborn. The air was clean, the shadows retreating into memory. Alex stood outside Garrett's cabin, the talisman now dormant, its purpose fulfilled. The villagers greeted him with hope and gratitude, a future free from fear. But deep beneath the mountain, a faint pulse stirred, almost imperceptible. Some darkness never truly dies.